Now we're just going to polish these surfaces here. We can't do these because they're out of round, but the round lobes that go on those little caps. So we've washed all these bits and pieces, but you'll notice that's the inlet cam. It's got this little spring on the actual gear just to keep those gears in contact, in mesh with each other. So it pays to actually whiz them off and just clean all that rubbish that's all in behind that as well. The exhaust cam, we've gone and linished all these little journals where it sits on those alloy on these. The rockers don't look too bad. They're probably a little bit worn, but adequate. What else have we got? These ones get their lube from this side of that little bracket. So you want to make sure that those surfaces are nice and flat. Whereas these ones, they're lubricated on the bottom part of the head. The oil comes through these here, and on those other one it comes through here and then goes through there and drops down. Nice and clean. If you're assembling this, remember, if you're going to put it in your vise, that bit there with your vise, don't grip on these lobes or on the cam lobe. Now if you didn't know which way this went, you can actually see that there's a little witness mark there. You can see on this side of that pin. So that tells me that that would have been working like that. And then that little pin there hits up on there, right there, just in case you didn't check it out. And the way you can confirm that is that there are three little holes. The bigger hole, you have to see through there. There's a threaded part on that. When you're assembling this, what you do is you put a little bolt in there, because you need to have tension or spring tension in contact with those two cam gears there. And don't forget to put your little spring washer before you put your circlip on. Again, your circlip will be rounded on one side. Always put the sharp edge where it would be pushing off or where there's any pressure there. You can see where the circlip was, so I'm going to flip that over and I've just put a mark on it so I know to put the join of the circlip on the opposite end. And it looks like they've put the circlip in the wrong way. You can see that it was like that, and that's the rolled edge there. So I'm going to flip that over like that, so it's got the nice sharp edge located in that little groove. And because that washer is spring steel, you might need to tap it in like that. This side's not in. You want to make sure that the circlip's in that groove. Now you'll notice those teeth are out of match. What we need to do now is to just tension that up. There's a little thread in here. You put a little bolt in there, and then when you line up the marks on your two cams, you just take that bolt out and that'll mesh those teeth in nice and tightly because of this spring steel bit. So what you do is you get a little tool here and you tension it up. Hang on. You can see I'm just tensioning it there. The teeth are lining up, and you just put your bolt in. That'll do, you don't have to do it up too tight. And now those teeth are nicely lined up, and you'll be able to mesh those teeth in a lot easier. Now another thing I like to do, you'll notice that these have like a burr there, a sharp burr. So you can get like a punch and you just basically just roll that burr that way. You don't want that burr touching the cam lobes. And careful also that you don't scratch that in there. That's good. These are alright. But sometimes if you just run your thumb on there, you'll feel there's a little bit of a burr there. A little bit of oil. And we carefully put the cam in. Like so. We've got that mark there on one and that mark there on the other. And we've got our bolt in, so it'll be easier to mesh in like that. There we go. You can see that those marks are nicely lined up. These are the little caps that go on top of the valves, and you also want to check to make sure that they're not really worn. These aren't too bad. A little bit of oil underneath them, under there, will be beneficial. Make sure you've got your dowel pins there. And these are all numbered. They should have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's also a little arrow that points forward. Okay, now we need to rotate it around and make sure those teeth line up. Back in, there we go. And now we'll just put all that back together. We can take that out now. And now we've just moved the pistons down a little bit just so those valves don't hit them. The reason being because the timing hasn't been all synced yet, just to see how your valves are spinning. And that looks nice. Now it does spring like that because it's on those rockers, and that's what the belt's usually stopping it from jumping like that. Now we haven't torqued these up yet. I've just tightened them up by hand and just making sure that everything's nice and free as it should be. Rocker arm and camshaft. You've got your cam bearing cap bolts, the smaller ones, the 6mm, 11 plus or minus 1 Newton meter, and you've got the bigger ones which are at the front, 20 plus or minus 1 Newton meter. We're going to adjust the valve clearances cold, and you've got your intake valves at 0.09 millimeters, exhaust at 0.14 millimeters. So we've got the inlet side, the exhaust side, 0.09 of a millimeter, which is about 3.2 thou, and 0.14 on the exhaust, which is about 6 thou. So they're not very big clearances. And the way you do it, you need to have, you'll notice there's little wear marks on these lobes. You want to have it on the rounded bit when you're adjusting it. You don't want the valve to be lifting at all with this, with the lobe. So we're just going to rotate them around and until we're on the bottom part of that lobe. Now, because of the springs, you'll notice that they're locking up, so you might need to get an assistant to just hold the gear there in place while you adjust it. When it's in the vehicle, it's a little bit easier because you've got all those timing belts holding it all where it should be. We've got the lobes higher here, so we can adjust these two. So what we do is I'll do it this way. You just slide your little feeler gauge under there, and you just want it between the lobe and that rocker, and it just needs to be tight to pull out, and you loosen that Phillips head and the nut, and you just tension it up and lock up your lock the little lock nut on. Now I've got a 12mm socket there, and what I do is I've grinded 2 straight edges there just so I can hold it or lock it with the shifter while I'm holding the screwdriver in there. So we'll adjust it up like so first with the feeler gauge in there, and we'll slide the socket over, and while I'm holding that screwdriver in place, I'll just tighten that lock nut, if that makes sense. And the lucky last one, we've done that one was rocking, and this one. .09s are very hard to adjust because the feeler gauge is so thin. As you're pulling the feeler gauge out after you've adjusted it, if you hear or feel a step or a pop, it means you've done it too tight. It should just slide out just nice and hard and not have that little step there. lucky last one. A little bit too tight, and the lock nut is a little bit tight, not really tight, just so I can adjust that without it all moving. There we go. So I can lock that on there now. Actually loosened up again. It is fiddly. It'll take you a little while to do it properly. Weightless. Sometimes by just tightening the lock nut it'll tighten it a little bit. You can try that. But when it's all well and lubricated, it won't. There we go. That's just nice and snug there, like that. And as we slide it out, we don't want to feel a little click, it just wants to be tight. There you go. And the final mark. So we've done, when you do it together, it'll always be one inlet and one exhaust will match up. And now that the tappets have been done, we can just spin it around, see how it looks. And it's looking good, it's not jammed up on anything. Good time to double check your work. We're going to confirm timing mark, usually goes up. The two marks on the cam, between the cams, the inlet and the exhaust. We've torqued up all these caps. We've, what else, adjusted all the rockers, or the tappets. And now we need to loosen this, put a seal in there, the front seal, and then we can go to the next stage.